The X3 is finally here. Smaller name, bigger display, but is it the camera we've all been waiting for? I'd like to thank Insta360 for sending me this for the purpose of making this review. The brand new X3 drops the 1 from the title, but keeps the same shape and size as its predecessor. I still think this is the best form factor for a 360 camera because it's so comfortable to hold. There's no worry about accidentally touching and smudging up the lenses, and my fingers don't show up in the footage. This time they've made just a slight change to the front. If you look really closely, you can just about notice that they've added a massive 2.29-inch touchscreen display. This is one of the big upgrades, and it makes an enormous difference having a large display like this. Not only for seeing what you're recording and viewing your footage, but now navigating the interface is a piece of cake because the menu is so easy and intuitive. The tempered glass curves to conform to the edge of the body, and this makes it feel silky smooth, like listening to Sarah McLachlan wrapped in silk pajamas on a Sunday morning. Below that there's a record button and another button that switches between 3 different lens modes. On this side there's the power button and quick menu button, which lets you create and save your own shooting configurations for quick access at any time. And on the other side there's a USB-C charging and data port. The body feels super solid and it has some real weight to it. Unlike a modern smartphone or a work injury lawyer, this isn't at all slippery. The perimeter is made from a high grip, textured, semi-soft polymer, and unlike my grandmother's bottom, it doesn't make a sound when squeezed. Flipping these 2 switches reveals a removable battery, something I'm very pleased to see. And of course the all-important tripod socket on the bottom. My granddad always used to say, there's no problem that can't be fixed with some tripod sockets, a hammer, and a roll of duct tape. To keep it safe and cozy, they include a nice padded case with a thoughtful cutout for charging. It's completely waterproof down to 10 meters. Just make sure the doors are fully closed and the little latches have clicked into place. Something new to the X3 is that the photo resolution has been bumped up to 72 megapixels thanks to the new sensor. You can also take photos using just the front or back lens if you don't want a full 360 image. I leave the camera set to auto most of the time, but for night shots I find the full manual controls really valuable. The most significant upgrade for video is the new dual half-inch sensors, which, being larger than before, should give the video and low light performance a boost in quality. Like the previous model, the max resolution is still 5.7K. I know some people were hoping for a higher resolution, but I think it's still just technically really hard to put dual 8K sensors into something this small without making some big compromises in size, battery life, heat management, and cost. Damn you, physics. I was hoping to see 5.7K 60, but we're still limited to 30 FPS at that resolution. But we do have 4K 60, which still produces usable 360 footage. I keep it on 5.7K 30 most of the time, and I think the footage looks great for a consumer 360 camera. There were 2 other new recording modes. Pre-recording is kind of like a time travel mode. When you press the button, it records 15 or 30 seconds of footage from before the button was pressed, so you don't miss something crucial. I wasn't able to test that mode because it wasn't on the pre-release firmware, but it should be available by the time this video goes out. And loop recording records continually on a user-definable loop of up to 30 minutes, so you can use it like a dash cam or a motorcycle cam. Instead of always recording a 360 sphere, we can choose to record with just the front or back lens, so it can be used like more of a traditional action camera. Also, in this mode, you don't have to reframe or export in post. The files are ready to use right out of the camera. And with one lens being turned off, you can use a chest mount and get first-person shots for your bike rides and things like that. Single lens mode has some different options for field of view, and in default FOV you get stabilization built in, whereas in FOV Plus you have to apply stabilization afterwards, but that mode gives you the widest possible field of view. This is another new feature. It's meant for use with a selfie stick, and it keeps the frame always pointed at whatever's on the other end of the stick, which is usually going to be yourself. The X3 has the same fantastic stabilization that Insta360 is known for. In 360 mode you can walk, run, cycle, skateboard or whatever, and the footage is kept smooth and steady. Even when I'm running up these steps with a backpack full of camera gear, it looks like I'm floating up on a jetpack. Active HDR lets the camera capture more dynamic range, so it brings out more detail in the shadows without overexposing the highlights. In this clip, I'm pointing directly into the sun, and that shaded area under the wall would normally be almost black. But with HDR turned on, the detail in those shadows is well preserved, and the sky isn't blown out by the sun. What's different about the X3 is that HDR can now be used for shots that have motion. The magic of 360 cameras is that you can capture everything around you without really having to think much, and then choose what you want to show afterwards by reframing in the desktop software. And this is where you'll get the highest quality outputs. It has a very useful object tracking tool which saves a lot of time when reframing. In this shot I used this ultra-long carbon fiber selfie stick to simulate a drone flying overhead. But for the more creative and exciting tools, you'll have to head over to the smartphone app. This is where all the fun, creative tools are. There's so much cool stuff you can do in the app, I'd have to make a whole separate video to show you everything. But basically, the app is where all the cool effects are, and the desktop software is where you'll get the best quality. Battery life is good, even though it now has larger sensors and a bigger display. By using the auto sleep option, which turns the display off after a set time, you can make the battery last longer. In this battery life test, the camera is indoors, with no airflow, and I kept the screen on the whole time just to see what the worst case scenario would be. The X3 brings quite a major upgrade to the time-lapse feature, which now records in 8K. The results I was able to get with this were really nice. There's also time shift, which automatically creates a fast-moving effect, which looks cool when walking through built-up areas. Another mode I really like is star lapse, which captures the motion of the stars. If you're into bullet time, the X3 takes it up a notch, now offering 4K 120 FPS and 3K 180 FPS. The video quality in the 3K mode isn't great, but you do get a much slower motion. I like the 4K 120 FPS more, and I think in decent light, the quality is perfectly usable for videos for social media. In the right surroundings, you can get some pretty interesting effects. The X3 has a larger half-inch sensor, which should make low-light video and photos look better and have less noise than before. I don't have the One X2 here to compare, but I was happy with the low-light stuff I was able to capture on the X3, considering it's a 360 camera. This is an indoor audio test with the X3 sound set to direction focus. This is an indoor audio test with the X3 sound set to stereo. I've got two separate microphones, so we can get stereo sound. This is an outdoor audio test of the X3, and I'm shooting in single lens mode, 4K 30, and the sound is set to stereo. I was surprised that the audio sounded as good as it does. I expected it to sound a lot worse because the microphones were quite bad on some of my older Insta360 cameras, but on the X3 it's actually pretty great. If you want even better audio, there's a microphone adapter sold separately that allows you to connect a lav mic for a more professional sound. I normally complain quite a lot about most cameras and just life in general, but I really don't have many complaints for this one. You still have to register and activate the camera before you can use it, which I'm not a big fan of, but the same is true for just about every other modern action camera on the market, not to mention phones, tablets, watches. Even my girlfriend's smart toothbrush had to be registered before it could work, and it's a toothbrush. The only other thing I'd like to see them change would be to let us turn off the haptic feedback vibration that occurs when you turn it on and off, and when you swipe through the menu. It's not a big deal, but I would like to be able to turn off that buzzing sound. So I've been using this every day for the last couple of weeks now, and I think I have a pretty good idea of its strengths. The X series has been refined so much that this iteration really feels like the third generation device that it is. It feels like something that's had almost all the creases ironed out. It's a pity the max resolution and frame rate haven't been increased, but it does have a new larger sensor that's better quality and better in low light, and we have some upgraded features like active HDR, 8K time-lapse, and better bullet time. Also, the build quality is phenomenal. But for me, the thing that makes this so much better than the One X2 is the new display. It's enormous, it's bright, and it's responsive. It's an absolute joy to operate now. Having an easy to use and frictionless interface makes a big difference to my stress levels. I was even able to skip 2 of my anger management classes this week. Navigating the menu is basically effortless, and you can play back your shots right on the camera on a screen that's actually big enough to see what's going on. So yeah, I think this is going to be a very popular camera. It takes everything that was great about the X2 and improves upon it wherever possible while keeping it small, pocketable, and around the same price. It's just a really nicely put together device, and it gets a big thumbs up from me. If you found this useful or interesting, I'd appreciate a thumbs up from you. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.